Chapter 11 of Anna Karenina, Book 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Liz Devens. Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Translated by Constance Garnett. Book 2, Chapter 11. That which for Vronsky had been almost a whole year the one absorbing desire of his life, replacing all his old desires, that which for Anna had been an impossible, terrible, and even for that reason more entrancing dream of bliss, that desire had been fulfilled. He stood before her, pale, his lower jaw quivering, and besought her to be calm, not knowing how or why. "Anna, Anna," he said with a choking voice, "Anna, for pity's sake!" But the louder he spoke, the lower she dropped her once proud and gay, now shame-stricken head, and she bowed down and sank from the sofa where she was sitting, down on the floor, at his feet. She would have fallen on the carpet if he had not held her. "My God, forgive me!" she said, sobbing, pressing his hands to her bosom. She felt so sinful, so guilty, that nothing was left her but to humiliate herself and beg forgiveness. And as now there was no one in her life but him, to him she addressed her prayer for forgiveness. Looking at him, she had a physical sense of her humiliation, and she could say nothing more. He felt what a murderer must feel when he sees the body he has robbed of life. That body, robbed by him of life, was their love, the first stage of their love. There was something awful and revolting in the memory of what had been bought at this fearful price of shame. Shame at their spiritual nakedness crushed her and infected him. But in spite of all the murderer's horror before the body of his victim, he must hack it to pieces, hide the body, must use what he has gained by his murder. And with fury, as it were with passion, the murderer falls on the body and drags it and hacks at it. So he covered her face and shoulders with kisses. She held his hand, it did not stir. Yes, these kisses, that is what has been bought by this shame. Yes, in one hand, which will always be mine, the hand of my accomplice. She lifted up that hand and kissed it. He sank on his knees and tried to see her face, but she hid it, and said nothing. At last, as though making an effort over herself, she got up and pushed him away. Her face was still as beautiful, but it was only the more pitiful for that. "All is over," she said. "I have nothing but you. Remember that. I can never forget what is my whole life, for one instance of this happiness." "Happiness!" she said with horror and loathing, and her horror unconsciously infected him. "For pity's sake, not a word more." She rose quickly and moved away from him. "Not a word more," she repeated, and with a look of chill despair, incomprehensible to him, she parted from him. She felt that at that moment she could not put into words the sense of shame, of rapture, and of horror at this stepping into a new life, and she did not want to speak of it, to vulgarize this feeling by inappropriate words. But later, too, and the next day, and the third day, she still found no words in which she could express the complexity of her feelings. Indeed, she could not even find thoughts in which she could clearly think out all that was in her soul. She said to herself, "No, just now I can't think of it, later on, when I am calmer." But this calm for thought never came. Every time the thought rose of what she had done and what would happen to her, and what she ought to do, a horror came over her, and she drove those thoughts away. "Later, later," she said, "when I am calmer." But in dreams, when she had no control over her thoughts, her position presented it to her in all its hideous nakedness. One dream haunted her almost every night. She dreamed that both were her husbands at once, that both were lavishing caresses on her. Alexey Alexandrovitch was weeping, kissing her hands, and saying how happy we are now. And Alexey Vronsky was there, laughing, that this was ever so much simpler, and that now both of them were happy and contented. But this dream weighed on her like a nightmare, and she awoke from it in terror. End of chapter 11.